Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. I think, we've spoken previously about, I'm really passionate about championing women in procurement. I think it's important that we raise awareness and raise the profile of women. You've all been very successful in your own rights and have set up your own company. So I thought it was a great story to take to market and kind of share your insights and experiences you've had along the way. I think what would be really useful is just to have a brief introduction from each of you and just to give us a bit of a background of your procurement journeys, if that's all right. So Lucy, did you want to kick us off?
I'd love to. Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for inviting us for this interview, this chat. I think it's really good that we maintain these kinds of dialogues, push women in procurement or women in industry generally. I think it's a really important message to drive out there. So really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. So my background, I've been working in procurement roles for about 20 years, following a degree in maths and economics. I fell into very much more of a commercial role through a graduate programme, and that sort of morphed and grew and evolved into procurement opportunities. And 20 years later, here I am. I think it's fair to say I didn't grow up as a little girl wanting to be in procurement. I wouldn't say it's one of those roles that necessarily stands out along with astronauts and princesses, but very much a dynamic, challenging, intellectually stimulating, exciting industry and business that we're in. I've worked in most private sector industries, manufacturing, retail, financial services, and so on, and predominantly again in the IT category space, although have dabbled elsewhere over the years. My last role before we set up Aster Commercial was a director of procurement at Clark's, which I think as an organisation demonstrated a real sponsorship of empowering women in leadership roles. Which was demonstrated in part, I guess, by my role, but also I worked alongside many other directors and C-suite women, which was a fantastic organisation to be in and an empowering organisation to be in on that basis. And then we set up Aster Commercial about 3 years ago. We remain 3 strong, empowered women leading our own business and doing the do in procurement. And it'd be interesting to understand and debate on this in this interview how we all feel about whether or not we've been constrained or restrained in procurement roles as females in the business. So is that okay?
Lovely, thank you. Sarah?
Right, so some similarities to Lucy actually, in that I've been working in procurement roles probably more like 25 years now. So I did a business and French degree, and then out the back of that decided to look for a graduate programme. I ended up working for Jacob's Bakery, which was part of the Danone group at the time, which appealed to me because obviously they were a French organisation. And they sent me all the bump through and it said, you must apply in a certain discipline. So there was sales, there was marketing, there was finance. And then there was this procurement and logistics, which I'd never really heard of before. So I read a bit about it and it was talking about analysis, numbers, blah, blah, blah. And it just seemed to fit neatly with the kind of thing I like. So I'm a bit of a maths geek. I like calculating things. I like numbers and data. So yeah, it seemed to suit. So that's where I started off. They actually made quite a few people redundant and closed head office about a month after I joined. So I actually ended up not finishing the graduate scheme and ended up being a buyer almost within the first 6 months of joining, and then carried on from there. So yeah, so I've worked in manufacturing organisations. So I did a stint at Dyson in the early days. I've worked in food manufacturing companies. So mainly buying direct materials for the first sort of half of my career, and then moved into what was called indirects at the time, but obviously that's mainly around IT and things. So worked in financial services. So yeah, and then I've done some time as a contractor, and then went back into a permanent role. But really, I think my future's kind of, I really like working for myself. And I think one of the benefits of it is that it gives you that ability to work with a variety of clients and a variety of industries and a variety of procurement activity, really. So that's why I think setting up Aster was great for me, and why I can't see myself ever really going back into a permanent role working for somebody else. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but by no means least, Emily.
Thanks, Hayley. Thank you very much for having us today. It's a really great opportunity to discuss women in procurement. And I think we'd all agree that we have historically worked in a predominantly male environment, because we've been through various industries where IT and technology have been predominantly in that male space, but equally have come across some fantastic female role models that have inspired us and put us on this journey. So I have a fairly checkered history before I landed in procurement. Similarly to Lucy, I didn't dream as a little girl of landing in the procurement world, and actually started off training as a chef. That didn't go well, and I don't claim to be a very good cook at all. I then moved into occupational therapy, which again didn't quite work out how I planned. And at the despair of my parents, they sort of pointed me in the direction of doing a business management degree. And similarly to Sarah, I took French as well. And the third year of that degree was a placement opportunity. And I was fortunate enough to come across an organisation who work in healthcare products. And I worked for their procurement manager. And before I knew it, I was working on a fantastic project in the Far East, sourcing textile products. And by the time I finished my third year and went into my final year of my degree, I had a permanent role there and was juggling my degree with a job and travelling to the Far East. So I was really, really fortunate, and it totally inspired me and enabled me to see a really exciting career opportunity ahead of me. And I then moved from there into a very technical role, buying direct parts for a very technical organisation who made measuring equipment based near Bristol. And then I moved from there into telecoms. So I worked for Orange for a number of years and managed their IT services offshore in India for 4 years, which again was a whole totally different kettle of fish, but predominantly IT focused. And when they went into the joint venture with T-Mobile, I then played a part in terms of pulling those two procurement teams together and putting that governance in place, which again was a super exciting, totally diverse role. And I then took some time out to have a family, and then was really fortunate to get a role working with Lucy and Sarah at Clark's a few years ago. And again, inspired by wonderful, amazing women, we decided to set up Aster, and here we are today. And it's been a great journey, and the variety of our clients is what absolutely suits us. No day is ever the same, and that for me is what procurement is all about. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Lucy, what would you say? Is there anything that's particularly surprised you about procurement as a profession?
I think, funnily enough, it dovetails just onto what Emily was saying about variety. I think, if you ask a lot of people, perhaps with a slightly historic view on procurement, it's a little bit about banging your fist on the table to get the best price. In my experience, it's been the antithesis of that. It is, you encapsulate so many other aspects in a procurement role. You work alongside the legal team and lawyers, and your skill set and capability and your involvement in that legal side of things is so key, and for me, so a large part of what I do. You get embroiled with finance and the development of business cases, project management to support the development and the implementation of decent project governance, and financial control within that governance, operations, to make sure you get the right arrangements in place to meet operational needs. It couldn't be less like the banging your fist on the table to get X% off a price, in my experience. And I think that's what surprised me. And I think, to the point around not growing up wanting to be in procurement as a little girl or even or a boy, to help people's understanding of the breadth of a procurement role, and the value that a procurement role can bring is absolutely critical to people's understanding. That then probably lends itself to the adoption of procurement within organisations, again historically, and in my opinion quite incorrectly, seen as sometimes an inhibitor to progress, a bit of a box ticking exercise. Absolutely not the case. Strong adoption of procurement within an organisation has some of the most fundamental value added opportunities that you can expect. If you're an organisation that spends substantial sums of money with third parties, having procurement capability in a business that envelops all of those wider elements like finance, legal, ops, and so on, I think is a really a critical part of the successful business operation. And so for me, to answer your question, I think that it's about what surprised me was the length and breadth of a procurement role. And certainly as an individual, and I know Sarah and Emily are the same, you make your own role, you add the value that you can based on your own skill set and your own appetite to go out and expand the value that you can bring to a business. So
it's one of the very few professions where you touch upon every single part of an organisation. You have a complete holistic overview of a business and you are feeding into every single part of it. There's so much breadth to it. It's just a shame that it's still quite an immature profession in terms of the marketplace. You've obviously got finance and legal, and people study for their accountancy qualifications or to become a doctor or a lawyer. But at the grassroots level, procurement still isn't seen as an option for people exiting school or going into university. So I definitely think more needs to be done at that level for people to really see actually what the opportunity looks like for individuals joining. I guess if we talk about barriers, because Emily, you cited earlier about some challenges you've had, particularly being in the tech space, which is quite male dominated. Have you faced many barriers throughout your career, as either being a female or being in the tech space, that's been particularly?
So I think it's interesting, and we debated this at length, the three of us, and sort of came up with a little bit like, well, I'm not sure we really have experienced any barriers. I think I have had one point in my career where there was a recognition of a pay disparity. And I'd been reshuffled into a new team, and my manager duly told me that he was going to adjust my pay, which was very honourable of him. And obviously, I had no idea that had been the case. I think for me, it's probably, and the role that I have done, and predominantly some of our clients that we manage now are not in the UK, and it's more about the cultural considerations. So I've worked in India, I've worked a lot in the Far East, in China many moons ago, and have had to recognise that the need to adjust your behaviour as a European woman, lady, in that environment, and taking that on board. And it may be that you're exposed to cultures and beliefs that don't necessarily fit with how you work in your day-to-day life, but you need to respect that and then adapt your working practices and indeed your own practices to respect that. So that's always been interesting, and I've always really enjoyed that element. And again, it's down to that variety and those different touch points that you experience depending on the projects that you're working on. So yeah, interesting.
And would you say you've had any barriers being in the technology space as a female at all, like with either vendors or suppliers that might try and out-tech you with all of their various acronyms, or try and, make it simpler for you to kind of understand? Has that ever been an issue, would you say?
So I think there's always an element of a patronising salesperson.
Yeah.
I don't know that would that's been a barrier, but I guess that's experience and seeing through it. You'll always come across people who think they know more, or there's some way that they can get around you. And I think that's part of the challenge of procurement, is that you're often seen as not knowing what it is you're actually buying. And then if you actually turn around and do know what you're buying, it's that credibility that you need sometimes. But equally, it's putting a different perspective on things, particularly in IT, because we frequently meet teams who are really excited about the next new shiny thing that they want to buy. And we'll absolutely support them with that, but let's get it for the right price and the right terms and make sure that they're not walking into a completely risky situation. Yeah. So, yeah.
May I add to the point around women in technology? I've been working on a program for a year or so now, and all of those elements of the business, the operational, the legal, the financial, the architectural, operational, all of those elements of the business are represented by men. I've been working on the same program with approximately, I would say, 20 individuals, both on the side of our client and the side of the potential suppliers, and not encountered a single female. And I think that's, I think it's disappointing. I think it's demonstrative of women in technology. There's been I've not encountered any issues being a woman in that space, but I think it does represent a wider challenge associated with bringing women through in those types of roles. And maybe given our reflective ages, I guess that maybe that is changing, and maybe, you know, the generation behind us, or those coming through the process 10 or 20 years behind us, it's far more even, but my visibility at the moment is not that. Yeah. Is that fair, Emily?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, although I'm working on a program at the moment with the most amazing female IT project manager, and but everybody else in the team is male, and it is absolutely fascinating. I think if you, at our level, maybe if you come across women, they are absolutely top of their game, but we've all had to work super hard to get there and be very focused on it. And I don't know whether or not that's the same for men. And I might be being horribly generic about the whole situation, but I guess we work in it day to day, and that might be some, you know, a bit of an observation. But and I think it's a shame, because I would hope that it's not putting women off going into IT. Yeah. Because it really shouldn't, and we need more women. And openly, a lot of the men that I work with say we need more women. We need more skilled women to you know, bring better balance to what it is we're doing and how we're looking at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, it comes from school age, doesn't it? The gender stereotyping. Yes. There are jobs for boys and there are jobs for girls, and that rhetoric starts so early on that you then get put into a box of, okay, well, I've got to be interested in this type of activity or this type of career. And I think more and more, certainly since COVID, you know, EDI programs that are running through organizations, they are now top of the agenda. People are looking at diversity within their supply chains, within their existing teams, encouraging women in STEM subjects. I think it's really enhanced people to take a look at their organizations and say, well, how are we attracting, you know, we're not just wanting to tick a quota here and say, okay, well, we don't have a female on the board, so we need to promote somebody. Yeah. That's not what it's about. Organizations should be looking at, okay, how are we attracting women to our organization? How are we attracting people from different backgrounds? Like, what are we doing as part of that recruitment cycle to ensure that people then come up through the ranks in the next, you know, 10, 20 years? So I think the tides are changing, and I definitely think it's hotter on people's agenda, certainly that we've seen in the last 6 months.
Let's hope it all works.
Yeah. Lucy, what would you say the kind of key skills and attributes that you think are important to help people, you know, in general, progress their careers in procurement?
It's interesting. I think this applies to men and women, and I think it applies outside of procurement as well as within. I think it's strength and confidence. And procurement, you know, going back to the old view of what procurement was, the banging your fist on the table, saying, yes, that requires a degree of strength, but it's a bit more of a blunt instrument. Whereas I think these days it's about having strength and confidence in your position, in your own abilities, in how you work and interact with other people, and within a project team, within a supply base, whatever it might be. I think from my perspective, I think the more successful procurement individuals that I've seen over the years have been ones that really try and consider drivers' motivations and objectives from all sides, and pushing suppliers, backing suppliers into a corner will not develop sustainable relationships or create sustainable sourcing. So just having an awareness of all parties' needs in negotiations is important. I think being able to interact at all levels in the business, and you find people that can only interact at the lower levels, and then some that feel that they only ought to interact at the upper levels. I don't find that's been historically very successful. You need to be able to interact and build relationships and discuss and debate at all levels of an organisation, else it can be quite constraining. If you want your role to permeate around all of those, across all of those different areas of a business, you need to be able to interact at all levels and represent procurement and commercial at all levels of a business, from dealing with business analysts or technicians through to the C-suite. So those for me are the key characteristics. Is to apply pragmatic approach, consideration for others and other organisations to develop sustainable solutions, and that ability to develop relationships and interact at all levels.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sarah, what do you think can be done to kind of support and encourage women to progress their careers in procurement?
So I think what's interesting is, if you think about the debate that we've been having up to this point, there's a few strands that we've already touched on that I think really lend themselves in here. So we have talked a lot about the perception of procurement and what that means. And I do think potentially people looking into the career or procurement as an industry who don't understand it or know it well might think it is a very male dominated, you've got to be hard, you've got to be tough, you've got to are potentially associated with male traits. Whereas, leading on from what Lucy was just saying, I think there are a lot of female skills and attributes, which I know there's a lot of work at the moment around, female leadership styles, whether that's through a man or a woman. But obviously, if you embrace more of that sort of female approach, I think actually from a negotiation point of view, it can get you a lot further, because you need to be able to listen, you need to be able to discuss, you need to be able to question. It's not all about sitting there and telling the suppliers how it is. That does not get you the right outcome. So I think it's probably first and foremost for me is about busting some of the myths about what you need to be good at to work in procurement is a start. I think opportunities for people to join the industry. So it's the same for any industry, right? So you've got a lot of people, as you said, coming out of universities these days. There's not a lot out there. They're struggling to find a career. They're taking jobs that aren't necessarily aligned to what they've learned at university or the skills they've developed. So I think we need to think about how we position entry-level jobs in procurement with a good career path, so that people can see how they can progress and how that works. And I think it's there. There are junior buyer roles, and then there is a really clear development path for people. But it's about making sure that that's well understood outside of the industry, I suppose. Particularly for women, you and I were talking about this before we started the interview, but I think flexibility is also key. So, you can't get away from the fact that there is a family aspect to being a woman, and it's changing. There are men who stay at home and look after children just as there are women. So it's not necessarily a woman only issue, but I do think that more flexible jobs, particularly in this climate where a lot of people are working from home, maybe people actually going forward will realise that you can do an awful lot. We do an awful lot flexibly, and we work with our clients flexibly and from a distance already, and it is efficient and you can do it. So I think if there were, definitely thinking about how you can make roles more flexible for people will help. And I think, again, we were talking about this before, but given that we are women who have been in the industry for a long time, I think we have a responsibility as well to be thinking about how we can get the message out to the younger generation. And to your point about particularly people in universities who are thinking about a career around, what procurement is and what it can be for people. And then we need to be offering ourselves out as mentors or support networks for people. I've been lucky in my career that I've had several good mentors, some women, some men, but it makes a big difference if you've got that experienced ear that you can go and talk to, and get some advice about how you approach situations or how people learn. So I think that the people who are already in the industry, particularly the senior women who are out there, it's kind of on our shoulders a little bit to support the newer people coming in, and to generate those opportunities. We're a growing business and we talk a lot about what would the future look like for us and how can we create some opportunities for people to actually join our industry, and how can we lend them the benefit of our experience, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. I mean, we ran a series of workshops recently with women in procurement that are either at entry level stage or kind of got 3 to 5 years experience wanting that next level up. And we explored the potential challenges that they have at the moment. And there were 3 themes to come out of it. One was confidence.
Okay.
One was around childcare / the flexibility piece, and then being potentially overlooked for a promotion as a result. And the other thing was the lack of mentors within their organisation that they could go to, or being paired with a mentor that was just completely inappropriate and not relevant for where they're at and what their needs were. So they were the 3 trends. So it's really interesting that you've kind of cited those. And I think confidence is massive. There've been some examples that some of these women cited that they don't feel that they are as heard as much, either on a Zoom call because some of their male counterparts might just dominate, or if they're trying to talk to suppliers and they've got themselves and another colleague, is wanting their voice to be heard. Or conversely, in times when they are then being dominant in a conversation or assertive, she's then deemed as bossy, whereas the male counterpart is clearly very domineering. She said, so are we having to adapt our characteristics and our traits to either be more like a man, or actually when I then do that, I'm penalised because I'm then seen as bossy? So I think, again, it's that typing that kind of permeates through the ranks essentially. So yeah, I think there's definitely more we can do, and I think as a community, I think it would be a great initiative to maybe set up some sort of mentor program and have a group of women that are available to give up some of their time on an ad hoc basis to mentor some of these individuals that are coming through.
Yeah, because how can we expect people to know they've never been in those situations before? And that's how you learn, right? And that's exactly what we would all say, is that we've had that experience of good opportunities and good people to show us the way, when we worked in big blue chip organizations, and that's what we're able to now bring within our own business. So yeah.
And I think I don't have much experience, or I can't really draw on anything where I feel I've been held back, or I've not been given all the opportunities that a man would be given. But I think I've been fortunate enough in the last 20 years to always work in organisations where there are women in leadership roles. And I don't mean like your manager or the department boss. I'm talking about C-suite roles, and you only need 1 or 2 of those to almost neutralise that perception that women aren't as strong or as confident or as capable as men. So I think one of the reasons I've not encountered some of the things that I'm very sad to hear that the examples you give from the women you spoke to, I've not encountered that because I've been fortunate enough to work with women in senior leadership roles, and therefore, and it comes from the top, and that by osmosis is mentoring, I guess, to an extent, isn't it?
I think it's very sector specific as well. I think you can look at the retail sector predominantly has more female leaders in it. Some of these women were coming from very heavy manufacturing, engineering, defence, organisations where it is still 80+% male dominated. So I think it does depend on the industry sector, certainly, that you've worked in. But you guys have been fortunate that you've all came together and worked for the same organisation. And not had those same challenges, but it's enabled you to set up on your own and now hopefully give back to generations to come. So I think that's a really positive news story. Yeah. Emily, have you had anyone in your career that's kind of really inspired you, and why?
So I can honestly say the first job that I had when I was at university, I was recruited by a guy who, clearly he really saw the potential of going into the local university and taking students on and doing that year placement, because they either ended up with resources that they would then keep, and carry on as they did with me. But he started the programme off, and by the time I joined, they were recruiting 7 students, which they were relatively small. They're only 250 FTE business, so it was quite a substantial commitment on their behalf. And I have to say, he always inspired, sort of travelled with me through my career. And then I was talking about this with Lucy and Sarah, and I said when I came out of that role, Kofi Annan was heading up the UN, and the way that he managed the particular global crisis that he was involved in, I remember being particularly inspired by his calm approach to negotiation. And I think one of the key things, as we've already discussed, is being prepared to go into negotiations, being calm, not banging your fist on the table, and being able to bring everybody together to come out with a really positive goal, or having the ability to say, actually, do you know what, we're not going to close this today, we'll walk away. Sometimes you have to have a really strong nerve, but be really, really calm on the outside. And I think that's something I've always carried with me, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life as well. It takes, it pays sometimes just to take a step back. So yes. And
Sarah, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, what advice would you give young Sarah now entering the world of work, if you could?
Okay. So this is a great question, Hayley. So and I did a lot of thinking about this one. So I think there is definitely to the point we've just been talking about, I would tell myself to be a lot more confident in my capabilities, and I would tell myself to be a bit more risky, prepared to be a bit more risky. I'm a bit strange in that I seem to have got less risk averse as I've got older rather than more. So normally people are much more risky when they're younger and then get more and more nervous as life goes on, whereas I seem to have done it the other way around. But then I also thought about the fact that I'm a bit of a kind of, your life is your journey type individual. So that there is also part of me that wouldn't change anything equally, because I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't done all of the things I'd done up until this point. And I guess if I reflect on my career, I have been very lucky or fortunate, whatever the word is, in that I've worked in successful, growing businesses where opportunities have been presented. Dyson is a really good example. I was only there for 3 years, but it was I joined sort of just before the turn of just before 2000, and it was a very fast-moving, fast-growing company at the time. So I was able to grow quite quickly in the 3 years that I was there, with it. And then I moved into a very traditional industry and sort of went the other way. But I guess what I've always tried to do is ensure that, each of the steps I've made as I've either moved jobs within an organization or moved sideways into different industries or different organizations, is just to say to myself, what's this going to give me that's different to where I've been before? And I think, I've always tried to, some of it's been luck that the opportunities have presented themselves, but I'd like to think that it's because, I kind of was building my skill set as I was going, that meant that I had more to offer as I went through. And definitely, the ability to be part of Aster now is because of that varied experience that I've had all the way through. So yeah, I think I'd probably say to her, actually, do you know what? Just do it all exactly the same, because where I am today, I'm quite happy where I'm sitting right now. So it's like the chaos theory. If I change something, maybe it would have all gone pear-shaped. So so yeah, I think yeah. But in seriousness, I mean, I suppose there are some sensible things I could tell younger people, like, always make sure that as you move organizations, you never burn any bridges, and I think people are really important. And the amount of times I've bumped into people again, even in different industries, and this, right? I mean, your job is all about building the right network with people. And I think that's really important as you move through your career. You never know where you're going to end up or what you might need. So I think it's important to just be kind to yourself and people around you as you move through as well, because you never know where you might end up.
Absolutely. But what about your biggest achievement to date, either within your career or in life in general?
So I was going to say having, building Aster with the girls, but that just now I said, that's obviously that's a real it's a real passion for me, procurement, these days, which some people look at me strangely when I say that. But I think the thing for Aster for me is it gives us the opportunity, as we've said, to really work with our clients and bring the experience that we've spent 20 plus years each of us learning. And I do get quite excited about helping clients do things right, do it the right way. But for us, we're not just helping people do the buying, we're helping them with their processes, their procedures, we're making sure they've got the right team, we're helping upskill their staff, we're helping them better understand their data. So to go back to Lucy's point at the beginning about the breadth of procurement and what it covers, I think what's really lovely is that within the realms of Aster, we get the opportunity to work with organisations across the breadth of the role. And so yeah, I think I'm really proud of Aster and of us as a team of women. You know, we're 3 years down the road and we're still here and we're still growing, and it's very exciting, you know. And I think if we can spread some of that excitement for procurement around and into the industry, then that will keep me motivated for several years to come, I'm sure. So
absolutely, it's a brilliant success story to tell the market. So what about kind of take the facade away, take the business away, just get to know you a little bit more? What do you like to do in your spare time, Emily, for example?
Oh, Emily, go on. If you go, Em.
So I have 2 small people. I spend a lot of time outdoors, essentially, and when I don't have my small people, I'm outdoors. So I love gardening. The girls laugh because since COVID, I've given up the gym and I've started doing a sort of boot camp outdoors in all weathers. It's exhilarating and slightly crazy, but it works. So yes, and then of course when we're not in COVID and lockdown, then I love going out for dinner and meeting friends and family and having a few glasses of wine.
Absolutely. To have a favourite restaurant?
No, I'm very lucky. I live in the middle of Bristol and I am surrounded by fantastic eateries. Yes, most of which I've been supporting in the last week in the lead up to lockdown. So I'm now on a diet. So.
Brilliant. And what about when we get to travel again, whenever that might be? Have you got Lucy, I guess, have you got your favourite place on earth that you'd like to go to? Where's your go-to holiday destination when this is all behind us, hopefully?
Well, do you know what's weird is, notwithstanding lockdown specifically, my holiday aspirations only tend to stay within the UK. I'm a massive fan of Scotland. I used to live in Scotland for many, many years, and I still have family in Scotland. I think it is one of simply the most beautiful and breathtaking places in the world. Honestly, it makes the hairs on my arms go up. It's beautiful. It can turn on a sixpence with the weather, and the view of Scotland can change every minute. You close your eyes, you open them, it looks different again. I think it is beautiful. I think it's underestimated. I think anybody that goes there can't help but fall in love with it. So Scotland. So I'm sure lots of people that you asked that question will come up with some grand, faraway, distant places that involve air travel and excitement. But for me, it's Scotland. It's fresh air. It's nature. It is the most extraordinary scenery. So
very good. And what about you, Sarah? What do you love doing?
So well, there's a couple of things that kind of float my boat. So again, the girls will probably laugh at this, but I never woke up one day saying that I really wanted to buy lots of property, but I seem to have acquired it along the way. So I play Monopoly with my kids quite a lot, and sometimes I feel like I've got one of the sets of properties, and I'm building houses on them constantly. So yeah, I'm stopping now for a bit because it's very tiring. But yeah, I think it's that building something new. So I've in the last 5 years, I've had a couple of properties that have needed a bit of renovation. So I love that kind of transforming something from what it was before into something new. And I could kind of see it, kind of see where it could be and where it would go. And the last one I did, it literally was like 2 houses in one. There was one family had been living on one side of it and one on the other, and we literally scooped out the whole of the insides, chucked them on the lawn, and then rebuilt it. So yeah, so but whether that needs to calm down a little bit, because finances and brain power and sleep need to get back. But other than that, I love running. I don't love running, actually. I find it really hard, but it's a necessity. And what it does is it gives me that headspace to just go and be outside, do some exercise, and not think about, well, actually I do. It's where I get my clarity, really. So I try and, if I've got problems to deal with or something I can't work through, then a run is a really good way of getting some space to go and think it through. So yeah.
How far do you like to run in terms of kilometres or?
So I tend to do 10Ks, and before all of this lockdown, so last year I did a 10K every month, like an organised event, and then this year we had a plan to do 10Ks every month, but it's been slightly scuppered. And the worrying thing is everyone keeps pushing them back. So if I'm not careful, I'll be doing about 10Ks in the 2 months of like the beginning of next year. But yeah, as long as they don't go one day after the other, I should be all right. So yeah.
Something. It was just literally one after the other.
Yeah. No, I lost you for a minute there, Hayley, but I think you were saying I'll become the Eddie Izzard of the 10Ks. Yes. I was just going to say the exact same thing. Yeah. So yeah.
And Emily, I'm not sure whether I should ask this, but I've been told you have a favourite smell. So I'm saying that with caution because I don't know what the answer is, but.
Oh, utterly set up because I was late for the call. Yeah. So my conventional answer would be almond croissants and coffee. My unconventional answer is my children most of the time.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yes, it's somewhat dependent on what they've been up to, but yeah, there's nothing like a good cuddle with your little people and smell. So yeah, thanks, girls.
I didn't know what the answer was. I thought, dare I ask? I had no idea what was going to be the response. So I was like, we might need to edit it out depending on what it is, but it's fine. That's fine. Well, listen, thank you once again for talking with us today. I think, it's brilliant to hear kind of your career journeys. The fact that you've all come together to form an organisation just makes it even more powerful. I think some takeaways would be definitely to look at some form of mentoring program. It's something that I'm keen on doing, and maybe setting up a procurement community that can do that, of experienced professionals that can lend their support to particularly some of the ladies we've had on some of our earlier webinars. So I do think that would be a good action point to take away from it. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
You're more than welcome.